Today we have an interesting video. So just as a heads up, what I normally do with some students is I take videos about a random topic and we use that as a point to start like a conversation or a discussion. This is really good because it gets students talking about different topics, so it makes them use different vocabulary. And sometimes it produces interesting conversations as well. Now, I do recommend this channel. So most of you might be familiar with TED Talks. They have variations, like in this case, TED Ed, which is for education. So they have videos, as you can see here, just talking about random things, right? This one in particular is an ethical dilemma. And the question is trying to answer is, would you lie? So it's going to propose a situation and it would basically ask you, like, what would you do? Now, of course, the situation doesn't have a clear answer. And I would say when you're talking about ethics, you don't really have like a correct answer because the answer will depend heavily on the person's context. And there are a lot of variables that come into play. So today we're going to be watching it. Um, we're going to try it without the subtitles. If you guys want to watch it with subtitles, you can let me know, or I'll be leaving the link to the video so you can watch it by yourself. What we're going to do is if I find an interesting place to pause to actually discuss about it, I'm going to do so. If not, I'm going to leave it to the end. Okay? It just depends on how the video is going to progress.
Your plan to set up your friend Carrie with your acquaintance Emerson is finally coming together. Both individuals have heard all about each other and they're eager to meet for dinner. You've just made them a reservation for Friday night, and you're about to text Carrie the details when an unsettling thought crosses your mind. Carrie is always late. And not just by 5 minutes. We're talking 20 or even 30 minutes late. Carrie seems to view punctuality as an oppressive relic of an earlier era. But what if you told them dinner was at 6 instead of 6:30? That way they would almost certainly arrive on time. You really want this relationship to work, so should you lie? Take a moment to think, what would you do?
Okay. So since they prompted us to take a moment and think, that's exactly what we're going to do. Now, first off, I've never been in this situation before, and I'm a firm believer that you don't really know for certain what response you're going to have to a situation until you're actually in that situation. So personally, I don't really know what I would do, but I can kind of hypothesize a bit of what I would do. Now, I'm trying to get two people that I know together because I think they might be compatible, right? My theory is if one of the two people involved tends to be late, even if I lie this first instance where I'm setting up the occasion, right? Then for all future occasions, the expectations are going to be set in motion. And what do I mean by this? If they both arrive on time during the first date, then they're expected to arrive on time for all the future dates. Now, the problem is all the future dates are not going to be organized by me. They're going to be organized by them. So they're not going to lie about the time because they don't know that I lied initially. So the person involved doesn't know that the other person is always going to be late. So this just creates like a false expectation or false hope. My initial thought is that you won't really get benefits from that, but we'll see where the video goes from there.
Maybe you should lie. You think this new relationship could be great for Carrie, and you don't want them to ruin it before it's even begun. Sure, Emerson may eventually learn about their chronic lateness, but if Carrie shows up on time just this once, the relationship will at least have a chance to take root. Your lie would.
The problem is she mentions what my hypothesis is, right? The problem is it might take root based off lies. And do you really want to be involved in that? I mean, Personally, I don't think it's worth it.
Pave the way for a potentially happy relationship. And if taking an action will create a better outcome for everyone involved, that's normally a pretty good reason to take it. But isn't it morally wrong to lie? The absolutist position on lying, associated with German philosopher Immanuel Kant, holds that lying is always immoral, regardless of the circumstances. In other words, there's a moral rule which forbids lying, and that rule is absolute. You might think, though, that this stance overstates the moral importance of lying. Suppose a murderer were hunting Carrie down. If the killer asked you about Carrie's whereabouts, it seems odd to say that you must tell the truth at the cost of your friend's life. From this perspective, absolutism seems too rigid. By contrast, utilitarian philosopher John Stuart Mill would say lying is wrong only when it leads to less happiness overall. Now, to be fair, most lies do seem likely to create unhappiness. Someone who accepts a lie believes something which is false, and trying to conduct your life on the basis of false information doesn't usually go well. However, in some circumstances, perhaps including your situation, lying might produce more happiness overall. In those cases, utilitarians say it's not morally wrong to lie. In fact, it might even be your moral duty to do so.
Okay, now this is an interesting perspective. I think the morality involved with lying is very fickle, right? It is very sensitive and it depends a lot on the context. So it's relative to the situation. I completely disagree with the absolutism version. I don't think you should always tell the truth. Now, I also don't think you should be a chronicle liar, right? I think it requires a balance, like most things in life. There are situations where lying might be beneficial to some extent. And might be situations where it's just not, right? And there are situations where lying just really doesn't matter. For example, in the video, they kind of showed a situation where Santa Claus was involved, right? Santa Claus, of course, not being real, but we kind of do tell children that he's real. Now, the reason why we do that is because creating that tradition produces a certain degree of like expectancy for the children, and it makes the celebration, I suppose, special in a certain way. I don't know if there are studies made where they analyze the development of a child who, like, from the start knows Santa Claus is not real, and then children who believe Santa Claus is real until a certain age. I don't know when children learn the truth, maybe like 8 or 9, I suppose. I don't know. But, anyways, what I'm getting at, I do think lying can be, I don't know if good is the correct word to say, but lying can be situational, is what I'm getting at.
But if absolutism seems too extreme, you might feel this stance is too lax. In other words, perhaps the utilitarian position understates the moral significance of lying. Most people generally feel some regret about lying, even when they believe it's the right thing to do. This suggests there's something inherently objectionable about lying, even when it leads to more happiness. In this case, lying to Carrie would be an instance of paternalism. Paternalism is interfering with another person's choices for that person's benefit. This might be fine if that person is a literal child, but it seems disrespectful to treat a peer paternalistically. Lying to Carrie would mean taking away their opportunity to handle the situation as they see fit, based on their own beliefs and values. Trying to protect Carrie from what you consider to be a bad choice would show a lack of respect for their autonomy. By extension, it might also be disrespectful towards Emerson, since you would be deliberately trying to give him a false impression of Carrie's punctuality. So how do you weigh potential happiness against guaranteed disrespect?
Okay, so that's interesting again. I do agree that manipulating a person's decisions when they are an adult normally isn't something you want to do, but I do think it's different when you do so by lying and when you do so by maybe recommending the other person or giving tips, right? Now, if the person here were to say to their friend, hey, try not to be late because, people kind of respect their time and it's not good for you to be late, then they're just like giving them a heads up, right? It's still in the hands of the other person whether they decide to be late or not. And you get involved from, I suppose, a morally sane ground. Now, if you manipulate the time, then you're lying, and you're also manipulating the person, which potentially could lead to other bad things in the future. The narrator here talks about indirectly manipulating the perspective or expectancy of the other person involved because in the future their date won't arrive on time, right? Which is what we were talking about at the beginning. And between all of the things that have been mentioned up until now, that is still my stance. What I mentioned towards the initial part of the video.
Followers of Kant would say treating others with respect is the heart of moral conduct, while followers of Mill would say nothing is more important than happiness. But other philosophers believe that such conflicts can only be resolved on a case by case basis, depending on various details and on the individuals involved. So, what will you do in Carrie's case? Keep testing your decision making.
Okay. So again, that was an interesting video. It kind of gave us the moral dilemma of lying about a schedule when you're trying to have two people meet each other. And they gave us the perspective of two different philosophers here. I'm interested in seeing what other people think about the situation. I've explained my perspective in case you didn't quite understand it, but it's I would not lie, probably. Just because you're creating like a false expectation to the people involved, and whenever they have to organize future dates, then time is going to be an issue, right? And you're going to be at fault to some extent for creating that false expectancy. You don't want to create illusions of things that are not the way they are, if that makes sense. I would like to hear what your opinion is on the topic. You can leave it in the comments or you can write it for yourself. I do think it's a good exercise for thinking. And if you write it down, it's also a good exercise to practice the language. Um, I'll see you guys for the next video then.